Is Passover really over? Well, that will be the story tonight that we're going to be discussing. But think of it. Tonight, just a half hour ago, Passover came to an end. At 8 o'clock tonight, Passover came to an end. An 8-day wonderful Jewish holiday. And I'm sure you all had a wonderful time spending time with your family, enjoying the matzah, enjoying the seders, enjoying the matzah. Well, we'll talk about that later too. But all in all, this 8-day holiday, now that 8 o'clock is over, then that means Passover is over. We're able to go back to what people call the good food again. But now that it's literally a few moments after the holiday of Pesach, is Passover really over? Can Passover, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, of the Jewish holidays, that now that has just left us, does that mean Passover is now over? So tonight, we are going to be discussing, is Passover really over, and how the theme of Passover can be brought through the entire year. But before we discuss that, I would love to discuss with you a few things about the Seder, about the Passover Haggadah, when it talks about the plagues, and ask a few questions on them. Come. As we study the wonderful Haggadah, which we did last Saturday night and Sunday night at our Seders, each and every one of us, we all said that there was blood and that there was frogs, etc. I'm going to ask a few questions. First of all, why did God turn water into blood? Why did God bring frogs? I mean, why these plagues? What lesson can we learn from them? And then there's another thing that blows my mind that nobody ever asks. What's the question? It says that the Almighty, He smashed, crashed, and trashed the Egyptians. He literally blew them out of the ballpark. He was the master. God was the master and controller of Egypt now. Was able to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. So because God was the master, all of a sudden we were rushed out of Egypt. We were pushed and we were rushed. And because we were pushed and rushed, we weren't able to go and make normal food. We weren't able to go to Ralph's, Gelson's, Vaughn's, Pavilions, Hughes, wherever they had in Egypt to go out and buy normal food and provisions to go out and eat in the desert. The only thing that we were able to do is take some flour and water, mush it together, and quickly, before I had a chance to rise, bake the food. Comes the question, if God was in total control, why did He make sure that we rushed out of Egypt? Why did we take our time, 2 hours, 5 hours, a day? Just say, tomorrow you'll be... Why was it that we were rushed without time to make normal food? And think of it. The whole idea of Passover is not a celebration. It's not to tell over a story, but it's to relive for 8 days the way the Jewish people lived in those 8 days. They left Egypt, so we have to feel as if we came out of Egypt. They were only able to eat certain foods which never had any leavening. For example, they were able to eat chicken, they were able to eat fruits and vegetables and wine and liquids, etc. But they didn't have any spaghettis and pizzas and cereals because of leaven. So we relived during the first 8 days exactly how they did on their first 8 days of going out of Egypt. But why is it that God made the Jewish people rush out? It would have been a little bit easier on us if we had an extra hour or two, and maybe the whole food concept of the holiday of Pesach would have been totally different. So if God was able to smash, crash, and trash the Egyptians, why didn't He allow the Jewish people to take their time for another hour and be able to make normal food? No one ever asks that question. But tonight I'm asking, and I will give you the answer soon. But first, the plague of blood. Let's talk about it. Blood. Why did the Almighty go and strike the Nile River and all the rivers all over the place that it should be full of blood? The answer is very simple. The Nile River was the god of the Egyptians. You're going to say, what do you mean it was the god of the Egyptians? It wasn't the cows and the lambs and all that stuff. Wasn't that the god? Yes, it was. But the Nile River was one of the gods that they prayed to and bowed down to because it doesn't usually rain in Egypt. The Nile River is the source of water and irrigation. So they prayed to it and they bowed down to it and they served it. So God wanted to show who's boss. He wanted to show the Egyptians, I want you to know that the supreme power in this world is God. You think you have a God? I'm telling you, I'm God. There ain't no God in the Nile River. So what did God first do? He destroyed the idol, the Nile River of the Egyptians. But there's got to be something more for the Jewish people. Why did God make water turned to blood. He could have made the water evaporate. He could have made somehow that a dam would have broken, an earthquake, and would have rerouted all the water. Instead of going towards Egypt, it would have been rerouted. As you see, the Mississippi can grow, and it all depends on floods and droughts. God could have made that somehow the Nile River, the water could have been unplenished. It could have ran out. Why did he turn the water to blood? To answer that question, we'll get to that in a few moments. Next question. The plague of frogs. Come. What was the plague of frogs all about? First of all, frogs. Why frogs? Not only that, why frogs? God goes and takes from the Nile River, which he just smashed and destroyed, and he showed that who is the power over what they believe is the greatest power, the idol of the Nile. What did God do? From the Nile River, God took the frogs and jumped them all over Egypt. Zillions upon zillions of frogs were all over Egypt, like it says that the frogs went into the pots, into the pans, and the beds, and all over the place of Egypt. That wherever you walked, wherever you were, if you lie down on the pillow, frogs jumped out from in the covers. That's how many frogs there were. Imagine, it's going to sound gross, but for us guys that grew up on the East Coast, you remember in Brooklyn that sometimes you opened up a light in a kitchen in the middle of the night, and all these little bugs used to all over the counter. Imagine when the lights were on, zillions of frogs all over the place. And there's not only that, but the croaking sounds were so terrible, so loud, that when a person had to go and talk to each other, when one Egyptian spoke to the other, they had to go into each other's ears and scream. So why did God bring frogs? Even a bigger question, if you study the Torah, as it says here in the Torah, it says that the frogs went into, like I said before, it went into their food vessels, went into their beds, it went into the ovens. Comes the question. The Torah is not a storybook. The Torah is not here to tell us history. It's not a historical account. Every word of God's holy Torah is to teach us a lesson, to give us a message. So when it says that the frogs went all over Egypt, okay, it said the lice went all over Egypt. The grasshoppers went all over Egypt. It didn't go and tell us that it went into the ovens, that it went into the beds. It just said it went all over Egypt. By the frogs, God made it a point to tell us that the frogs even went into the hot ovens. Why did the Almighty have to tell us that the frogs went into the ovens? What do I care? What lesson can I learn? So here we have three questions to discuss. One, why did God push the Jews out of Egypt? Two, why didn't they just take their time? If God controlled the nature of Egypt now, and they were so weak, we could have walked out slower instead of being rushed out. Another question I asked was, why did God turn the Nile River, the water, to blood? He could have evaporated the water if God wanted. A miracle's a miracle. Why turn it to blood? What lesson could we Jewish people have to learn from it? And the other thing is that I also asked is, why does it say in the Torah that the frogs went into the oven? So we have three questions. How am I going to answer it? The first one I'll answer with the blood, then I'll answer with the frogs, and then I'll answer why we were pushed out of Egypt. Trust me, on the night of Passover, by the Seders, we can ask many, many questions. But now that tonight Passover is over, I'm asking you these questions, and then eventually we'll ask the final question, the fourth question. These are your four questions. Is Passover really over? So to answer the first question, why did God turn the water to blood? Come. The answer is very simple. Every one of these plagues, sure, they came to hurt the Egyptians, to free the Jewish people from the bondage of Egypt. But every one of these plagues somehow, as we learn it every single year, has to teach us a lesson. Like I said, the Torah is not a storybook. It's not a history book. It's a book of unbelievable lessons. So that God turned the water into blood, there must be a lesson. What is it? First, let me take